Today we're going to learn page 19, half steps and whole steps, part 1. If you've been in band and you've played the chromatic scale, you've probably heard me talk about half steps, but not so much about whole steps. And it's really essential that you learn what these things are so that you can communicate with other musicians. Also, all of our scales are built and they are made up of half steps and whole steps, a series of these two things. So what is a half step? The half step, which we're going to use the symbol H, is the smallest interval used in traditional Western music. Well, you have to know what an interval is. Interval means the distance between anything. In this case, we're talking the distance between two notes. The piano keyboard is arranged in what we call half steps. The distance between two adjacent keys on the piano is a half step. When I say adjacent, I literally mean the key right next to it. So we have a series of half steps here. And you have to use your key here to figure these questions below out. So between C and C sharp, that is a half step. Between C sharp and D, that is also a half step. Between D and D sharp, that is a half step. Between E and F, that is a half step. And notice there's no black key here, so they put a little H here, this little caret symbol at the top, to show you that that is a half step. Okay? And of course, I'm going to refer back to this. Notice between E and F here, there is no black key. So between E and F, it is a half step. So between F flat and E sharp, that would also be a half step. Between G flat and G, that would be a half step. Between F sharp and G, that would be a half step. We can go down as well. Between B and B flat, that is a half step. Or B and A sharp, that is a half step. Or C flat and A sharp, or C flat and B flat, that would be a half step. As long as the distance between the two notes is literally the next key up or down, we call it a half step. I hope that was thorough. The next one here, with the W, the whole step is an interval, there's that word again, made by combining two half steps. So if you see this appear on your exam, a whole step is two half steps combined. Okay? Now what that looks like is this. You can see between C and C sharp, that's a half step. Between C sharp and D, that is a half step. So between C and D, that is a whole step. Okay? Between D and D sharp, half step. D sharp and E, half step. So this would also be a whole step. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a key. We're going to need to do this a little bit here. Okay? Now between E and F, that is not a half step. That is not a whole step. That is a half step because there is no key in between. So between E and what note would make it a whole step? E, half step, half step. So E to F sharp, also called G flat. That would be a whole step. Okay? Now, we're not going to worry about our note names. You're just going to use the keyboard as a visual instrument to help you answer those. Let's go ahead down here to number 1. Using the keyboards below, write the interval, whole step or half step, that is created by these O's here. So number 1, I'm going to recommend this. Know your note names. G to A flat, also called G sharp. Notice I stack them like this. So, let's check out our keyboard. G to A flat, also called G sharp. Is that a half step or a whole step? It's a half step, so we're going to write half step. Piece of cake. Number 2, know your note names. So I'm going to get my keyboard out, and you can of course look at other ones as well, or use the guide at the top here. Know your note names. This is an F, and this would be a G. So I'm going to put it below. There are no black keys here, so I'm going to leave that blank. Between F and G, half step and half step. So there are two keys between. There's one key sharing between, I guess you could say. That is a whole step. Okay, let's go ahead and do 2 more, and you can do the bottom 2 on your own. Number 3, write your note names. This would be E, also called F flat, but we're going to use a regular name for it. And this could be F. I'm going to call it F sharp instead of G flat. That makes it the next note up. And I'll put it directly under it. So there's a key in between. That makes it a whole step. You're probably thinking, Mr. Oster, are there other intervals? Of course there are. And if you're in jazz band, you're going to learn about them. That's how we build chords. So we could have, this is a half step is also called a minor second, and a whole step is called a major second. And hopefully you learn that in high school or college. And you definitely need to learn it in jazz band because in order to write your own solos and play along and read the chord changes in your solos, you're going to have to learn that. Okay, over here we have two notes highlighted, B and C. Is there a note in between? Nope, so it is a half step. You can do the bottom two on your own.